Hi, welcome or welcome back. Today I'm going to be addressing more relationship advice that you've submitted beforehand and that you weren't sure if you should follow. I'll break it down as always into three parts. First, I'm going to address for every piece of advice why I see some truth in it. Then I'll go into why I believe that advice is unhealthy if you want a healthy relationship. And third, I'll give you an alternative so that next time you hear that piece of advice, you know how to approach the situation and you can start to make an informed decision as to whether or not you should be listening to that advice. And if you're new here, I'm Alex, a certified life and relationship coach, and this is a place where I share how to build a healthier relationship with your partner, how to empower yourself to make informed decisions in your relationship, how to feel confident about the future that you have together, and also share a lot of behind the scenes from my own 15-year relationship. All right, let's get right in. The first piece of advice that you've submitted is your body knows if you're with the wrong person, and the opposite is true as well. The body can tell you a lot, and some people are very in tune with those body sensations, that intuition, and what that is trying to communicate with them. I've had clients who are so in tune with their bodies that they let that guide a lot of their decisions. Now, the reason I'm not a total fan of that advice is because many of us aren't in touch with our body's intuition as much as we think we are. We live more in our heads than in our bodies, and so we tend to confuse a real gut feeling with feelings that are generated from our mind. It takes awareness and intentional practice to really notice what is going on in our bodies. And I can tell you that from personal experience. I'm someone who has a lot of body sensations, but I tend to be more in my head than in my body if I'm not really aware of that. So the more I can tune into my body, the more I see how much it actually benefits me in making decisions. But a lot of times I've confused what my body is trying to say with what my mind was actually saying. And there are many different reasons for that, but one of the big ones is that many of us live in fight or flight mode. We are often stressed, we are tired, we are overwhelmed, we experience anxiety, we might have poor sleep, we might not be eating as well as we should. And so the body is in survival mode a lot, which blocks us from accessing our intuition. And I remember quite a few clients who were having doubts and anxiety in their relationship, and they thought that that was their body signaling that they were with the wrong person, when in fact we looked at the context and their situation and where their anxiety was coming from, and it had a lot to do with, one, how their body was actually in fight or flight mode, again, poor sleep, feeling stressed, feeling overwhelmed by other things as well, and they were living more in their head than in their body, meaning that they were noticing a lot of intrusive thoughts that led to the body sensations that they were feeling if they really noticed that. If I am thinking about something terrible, about something negative, about something sad, I will start to feel that in my body. So while I wouldn't recommend dismissing what your body is trying to say, I would consider first looking at how well your primary needs are being met. For example, how is your sleep? How are you eating? Are you getting enough movement? How stressed or drained or overwhelmed do you generally feel? Then practice noticing what's going on in your body in the day-to-day moments and what's going on in your mind. What are you telling yourself? What are you focusing on? What might be affecting your body sensations? Notice where you feel sensations in your body. That could be tension somewhere. That could be lightness somewhere. When I, for example, feel something, I feel it in my chest. Whether it's lightness or tension or heaviness, I feel quite a lot of things in my chest. And so I can start to feel, all right, now I'm feeling tense. What is that telling me? At the same time, I want to notice what I'm telling myself and what is going on in my mind so that I can start to separate both. Usually when we have an intuition or our body is trying to communicate something with us, it has no logical explanation to it. And so you want to understand, is my body sensation linked to something that I'm telling myself, linked to something that I'm thinking, linked to something that I'm focusing on? Or does it maybe have no logical explanation and I'm just feeling something in my body right now that's signaling something that I should pay attention to? And so start to build that awareness. The more awareness, the better. So the alternative here, if you do hear someone say that your body knows if you're with the wrong person and that the opposite is true as well, this is how I would start to think about it. My body can tell me a lot, but let me first make sure that I'm not clouding my sense of judgment, of intuition, by being in survival mode and being in my head. Now, the second piece of advice you've submitted for today is you should end the relationship if you need to work on yourself. I get why someone would advise you to do that because there are certain situations where that can be beneficial. Working on yourself can look like processing trauma. It can be like processing grief, like healing an addiction. If you feel like the way that you're showing up is negatively affecting the relationship, if you feel like personal challenges are getting in the way of you being a healthy partner and of you actually showing up in the way that you want to be showing up, then I absolutely get why you would want to leave the relationship, work on yourself, look at how you can process whatever you're processing, and come back stronger, come back feeling more grounded, more at peace, and more ready to be in a relationship with someone. Now, the reason why that advice can be unhealthy is because you can still work on yourself while being in a relationship if you have the safe space to do that and if you choose to do that. There are many things that you can still work on. There are many things that you can learn and you can grow into even if you are with a partner. It is not that black or white. It's not because you need to work on yourself that you have to automatically leave the relationship. That becomes a very personal choice and depends what you also want to work on. Now, that said, I believe that there are certain things that we can't work on if we're not in a relationship. And if you've seen my video on breaks, you know what I mean. I separate between individual work and relationship work. For example, if you're looking to improve your communication skills, if you're looking to improve your triggers and how you respond to situations when you're upset, those are things that you can learn outside of the relationship. Sure, you can end the relationship to work on your triggers and work on your reactions, work on your emotions, but you will only know how well you're able to handle situations when you're in the relationship. And so what better place, again, if it's a safe space to do that, what better place to work on yourself, work on certain things that have to do with the interactions between you and your partner while being in the relationship. It becomes counterintuitive if we're looking to work on ourselves outside the relationship for things that are worked on within the relationship. There's this common belief that we have to be fully healed, fully healthy to be in a relationship. That is just not true. Most of us don't enter a relationship being mature, being healthy, being secure, being stable. There are certain things that we are bringing to a relationship that have to do with how we've learned to deal with certain things in the past. And so the work in a relationship can be, how can we handle situations as a team? How can we break unhealthy patterns? How can we learn to deal with situations in healthier ways? That's a process that can create so much trust and connection with someone. Working on yourself is so broad, and so at the end of the day, it's a very personal choice. There are many people who choose to work on themselves regardless of what they're going to be working on while being in the relationship, while others will choose to take some time off from the relationship to have the space to work on themselves and what they want to be working on. So if you hear someone suggesting that you should be leaving your relationship to work on yourself, you want to be first looking at your context before making a decision. You want to identify what it is that you want to be working on. And then based on that, you want to be asking yourself if leaving the relationship could actually be an option for you. So again, context matters. Just saying that you should be leaving the relationship as soon as you want to work on yourself lacks context. We need to know what it is that you want to work on. Now, the third piece of advice that you've submitted is you should just click straight away with your partner or with someone on a first date, in that they get you straight away and they have many, if not most, common interests with you. I get why some people would say that because there are people who experience that. I do agree that you want some sort of connection or some sort of interest in each other before you invest further in the relationship. I mean, if you think about it, if there's just nothing in common, if there is no connection whatsoever, if you feel like they do not understand you, then I get why you would not want to invest more time in someone. That said, I'm not a fan of that advice because it sets unrealistic expectations as to how many relationships evolve. It's very common for couples to take time to get to know each other. Not everyone feels that instantaneous spark or that instantaneous connection to someone. And when it comes to interests, you can have different interests and just a few common ones and still have a wonderful relationship. Plus, interests are only one facet of a relationship. Factors like values, life goals, beliefs are also, if not more important, in determining your compatibility. And sure, it's really nice to connect with someone that you feel you have common interests with and that you feel like you're connecting really quickly with. At the same time, there can be value in discussing your differences and not restricting the conversations just to what you have in common. Maybe you complement each other in different ways, or maybe you get to know another side of someone that, even if it's different, you actually value and you actually love. And maybe you learn something very new because you're discussing your differences. And so there can be value in not just focusing on what you have in common and trying to find that connection really quickly, because again, you can have different interests and still make it work, and the connection can sometimes just take some more time to develop. And so the question is, if you're interested in someone, how long are you giving yourself to get to know that person? The notion of it clicking straight away away, again, can be a reality for many couples, but not the case for every single couple. And so having this belief that it should click straight away can actually sabotage many great relationships. And if I look at my personal experience, I wouldn't say that I automatically clicked with Dennis, and we certainly don't have a lot of common interests. And so the connection grew the more we spoke to each other. It grew the more we learned more about each other. And that's when we started to develop an interest in each other and saw that there are actually certain differences that complement each other. And so to give you a different way to think about this, when you hear that advice, you want to go, all right, we could click straight away. We could have an immediate connection. We could have many common interests. But let me focus first on getting to know my partner or the person that I'm dating before deciding if I want to stay with them or before I decide if I want to go on more dates with them. Not clicking straight away and having different interests doesn't automatically mean that there's something off. I would encourage you to be more curious and give yourself some time to actually know that person better rather than chasing this instantaneous feeling that many of us are hoping to have. The last piece of advice I'm addressing today is if they display a toxic trait, you should leave. I understand why someone would say that, especially if they care for you and they're concerned for your safety. So it makes a lot of sense. Now, I do see that that type of advice actually sabotages many relationships because one, the term toxic gets thrown around a lot, and so we need to be mindful of how we're using it. I've had clients falsely label their partners as toxic or as having a toxic trait and almost end a good relationship. As a rule of thumb, you can consider a toxic trait as being something that's harmful and destructive to the relationship. Now, some people will say that jealousy is a toxic trait. Some people will say that control is. Some people will say that manipulation is. And all of those are valid, but context matters. Unless I don't feel safe with my partner, for example, there's emotional or physical abuse and I'm actually in danger, does the person who's labeling my partner as toxic really know them? And do they know what's going on in our relationship? Do they have enough info or might they be jumping to conclusions? It's really important to take into account the context here. And two, many of us have traits that can be considered as toxic because we haven't learned how to be healthy, mature, secure partners. And we carry habits based on what we've observed in the past, what we've experienced, how we've learned to deal with situations. And so again, many of us have traits that could be considered as toxic. And three, just because someone has a toxic trait, it doesn't mean they can't change it. People are capable of making changes if they're aware of it, if they have a reason to change that trait, if they know what needs to happen to make changes, and actually start making small, consistent efforts to develop healthier habits. So if someone suggests that I should be leaving my relationship because my partner has a toxic trait, I can still listen to it, but I also get to determine if that toxic trait they're talking about is actually a toxic one given my situation. Do they have enough info to make that judgment? Then I get to be clear on what I'm willing and what I'm not willing to tolerate in my relationship so that if my partner does have a toxic trait, I know how to protect myself, I have boundaries, and we can start to address that. And then clarify if your partner is taking accountability for the way they're showing up and they're actually showing efforts and making changes. All right, thank you for submitting these different pieces of advice. If you have some of your own that you're not sure if you should follow, please comment them below. Like this video if you learned something new, and I'll see you in the next one.